Welcome to the MI Podcast for January 2012, where we bring you insight and information regarding the company's people, products, history, innovation, and future. I'm Paul Duval, and thank you for joining us. On this month's edition, we're going to discuss how to select an installer for medical lighting, as well as discuss the medical lighting installation process. We're going to try and break down this daunting task into a simple series of steps that'll make it easily understandable and that'll give you a foundation for being able to get the job done right. Joining me now is Keith Black, a member of the sales and marketing team here at Medical Illumination International and a foremost expert when it comes to installation both here at the company as well as in the field. Keith, thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, sure. Thanks for those accolades. That's amazing.
When it comes to the process of locating an installer, there are several different scenarios that come into play, and I figured we could start with giving a few general examples, and that will help cover the basic steps when it comes to locating the proper installer depending on your situation. So here's the first example. I'm opening a surgery center. I have some operating rooms and I want to purchase some major OR lights. Medical Illumination offers the System 2 series. In this case, it's brand new construction from the ground up.
Okay.
So in that case, who would I utilize for that type of situation?
In the case of new construction, typically you're going to have an architect who's going to design the building, the layout, and everything.
Right.
And they typically will have either a structural engineer on staff or they will refer that out. And what that structural engineer will do is not only look at the building structure, but look at the weight requirements and the off-center moment requirements of our equipment, in this case the System 2. And that information is available on our website. We have it so that you can just download a few pages that get the root information that those people need to make those calculations.
Right.
So once that information is in their hands, they design the building, they design the mount, it goes to the general contractor who will build the structural mounting for the light. At which point, then there is a plate, typically, that will be in the ceiling, and then all that has to happen is the light gets attached to that, and the wiring gets connected. Once the plate is in place, the lights are delivered. From the time that the electrician goes to install it to the time he's finished, it's probably a couple hours' time.
Okay, so just to sum up, you have the architect who does the design of the facility itself. The structural engineer becomes aware of what the requirements are for mounting the lights. Of course, if you go to our website, the System 2 page in particular, for the sake of this example, they could download the pre-installation guidelines, the entire installation manual, the cut sheet that will show the dimensions of the mounting plate, everything that they need. Then you have your general contractor do the actual construction, and then the electrician does the wiring. And that duration or time duration of actual mounting, we're looking at, you mentioned, a couple of hours. And that, of course, is not including the preparation that has to come beforehand as part of the construction itself.
Well, and that exactly. And that's the thing, is it's going to depend upon the kind of building it is, whether it's a wooden structure, whether it's a steel structure, concrete structure, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, there are a lot of variables that go into what it will take to get the mounting plate installed.
Sure.
And that's what your architect, structural engineer, and your building contractor work out.
Right. And of course, they have to be aware of state and local building codes depending on what part of the country or what part of the globe we're talking about.
Right.
Now, budgetary concerns. I know that comes into play when someone is opening a new practice, a new hospital, a new surgery center, what have you. Let's take this example of the surgery center with the OR lights. Is there any way to come up with a general range dollar-wise regarding what I will be looking at when it comes to the expense of installation?
Not simply. Typically, a general contractor will hire the electrician.
Okay.
And the electrician will give a bid for installing lights. Now, in that case, they're going to look at everything on the electrical schedule. It's going to be all the recessed lighting, all the 2x4 fluorescent lighting,
right,
incandescent lighting, hanging the lights in the bathroom, putting in the wall switches, the outlets, and all that stuff. Assuming that they put the surgery lights into their bid, there would not be an additional line item per se. If there is a breakout, I would estimate that an electrician would typically charge between maybe $800 to $1,200 as a line item for that, if they were brought in specifically to install the lights rather than the entire job.
Okay, so that, and then everything else is factored in as part of the construction expense
Right.
itself.
And
Okay.
of course, and that's a general guideline. I mean, depending upon the thing is, the system too is available with video systems and that sort of thing, which can increase the complexity of the
Sure.
installation and may require IT people, AV people that do specialty work and that sort of thing, which would probably run that up.
Right.
But just for lights alone, like I say, probably $800 to $1,200.
Okay, great. So essentially, in this example, you have everyone just about already on site to be able to do the job.
Sure.
Now, let's kind of shift gears here a bit. Let's talk about a clinic that is being remodeled. It could be a veterinary clinic, it could be a doctor's office, and in this case, there's only a limited amount of construction within a room or a series of rooms where new lights are going to be mounted.
Right.
What
And-
personnel are we talking about there?
Okay. In the case of a remodel, typically, if it's a medical facility already, the structures will already be in place in the ceiling. We would recommend that you consult with a structural engineer, at least a qualified general contractor, to look at those structures to be sure that, again, it meets the requirement of the pre-installation guidelines, that it has the strength and the rigidity that's needed for the lights to perform properly. And again, you're working with a general contractor, and the general will probably have an electrical contractor assigned to the job that, again, would take care of the actual installation. So in that case, it's going to be a simpler process, but at the same time, there may need to be some adaptations done, some reinforcement, that sort of thing, which could increase the cost of the light installation itself a little bit, but it would reduce the cost of the structure probably, if that makes any kind of sense.
Sure. Right. And also you have to factor in, if this is a remodeling, they may have lights already in there that are perhaps, let's say, 30 years old. Now you're bringing in lights that are newer, where the requirements are a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
The structures may have to be more robust,
Right.
and so thus they'll have to do some retrofitting perhaps if that's necessary.
Well, and depending upon which products it is from our history, a lot of our products have been designed to be somewhat interchangeable. Now, I won't get into a lot of detail of that, but there's a lot of our products. The mounting plates are interchangeable, bolt patterns are similar, wiring harnesses are the same, so
Sure.
that can actually reduce the amount of work that's actually required to mount the lights. But that's on a case-by-case basis.
Sure. Okay. So essentially, some of the same personnel as we had
construction.
with the example of the new construction, the architect, the structural engineer in some cases, the electrician, and of course the general contractor. In this case, we're talking about, I'm assuming, maybe a less expensive installation cost as opposed to the whole new facility itself?
Well, yes, mostly. The example that I gave with the new construction was to actually mount the lights to the ceiling of $800 to $1,200, and that's the System 2. If you're doing the System 2 in the remodel, that's not going to change. However, if you're in a smaller, but that's going to be for more sophisticated OR.
Right.
If you're doing a procedure room where you're doing, minor procedures or a less invasive OR, you may be using like our 21st Century Series line or MI1000 or MI-LED series. In which case, then the installation is not going to be as expensive because the products are simpler to work with. They're lighter weight. The requirements are not as invasive or as significant. So,
Right.
now, say for example, you're replacing a previous medical illumination light that doesn't require anything else. You might be able to do that for as little as $125.
Okay.
If you got to re-drill some stuff, you got to reconnect some stuff, you got to do some reinforcement, you could get up to, I would say, probably $500 pretty easily, or even more.
Sure.
But again, depending upon the application.
Okay, so and just to elaborate, when we say 21st Century Series, what we're referring to, just for reference, would be our Centura variable spotlight, the Century exam light, if you have exam rooms that are being remodeled, or if you have minor procedure or minor surgery lights, it would be perhaps the Centurion or the Centurion Excel.
Correct.
For the LED series, we have the MI1000 minor procedure light, soon to be released, will also be the MI500 exam light. So essentially, different variables coming into play, but the general example there should outline not only the steps involved, but also the expense.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, final example. Let's say I'm simply upgrading my lights. There's no construction involved, nothing that complex. I just want to take old lights out and replace them with new ones.
Right.
In this case, I would most likely need to find an outside person of some sort
Okay.
in order to be able to do the job. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, I don't already have somebody in-house. I don't have any direct affiliations. This is not a major hospital where they already have, biomeds on contract or anything like that. What are some of the steps I can take, or some of the options?
The replacement is probably in many cases the most common place where we get questions on this stuff, on installations. There is the instance where you have a light that you've had for a while, it's worn out, and it just needs to be replaced.
Sure.
Typically, a general electrician can come in, take that down, replace it, and it's not a big deal.
Okay.
And if you have a business, chances are you have somebody that electrician that you call in, every couple of years or something, somebody who worked on the building when you built or remodeled most recently. If not, you go to the phone book. You can do a search on the internet for somebody in your area, an electrician, licensed and bonded. We recommend, of course. The second choice would be to ask your medical dealer. Some of the salespeople will have either additional technical people, or some of them are pretty handy themselves. There's a caution there, of course, that you want to be sure that you have somebody who has the proper training and licensure, and that's why we mentioned the licensed and bonded.
Right. So essentially, if you're buying, let's say, medical illumination lights through an equipment and supply dealer, or whichever dealer you currently use for your other equipment currently, and they have, let's say, an installation service to go along with it,
I'd go with that. That's your best choice.
You could certainly do that. But if it's, let's say, someone who is just a sales rep who also happens to be, or who states that they can do the job as well, you obviously have to go through the same precautions and qualifications as you would with any outside person, for the most part.
Well, that's our official recommendation.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. So
and then the other choice too is, a lot of times you may have somebody that that comes in to either take care of or repair other kinds of equipment that you have. Most practices have sterilizers. They have anesthesia machines. They have
Right.
all that kind of thing. Dental equipment with power chairs and the drills and that stuff. A lot of times those technicians have additional training that you don't necessarily are aware of. So that's not necessarily a bad choice to call either. Ask and call and inquire with them. Say, hey, can you? I bought these brand new, beautiful medical illumination lights, and we
Right.
need to get them installed. Can you do that for me?
Okay.
And a lot of times they can take care of that too.
Okay, so these are just a few of the things that either the practitioner himself or herself, or the practice administrator, or whomever is coordinating all of this,
Right.
can take. With the electrician, would you say, and this is just an assumption, you could ask them, by chance, do you have experience with installing medical lighting specifically, as opposed to just your standard room lighting?
Yes.
As a
Well, and that's
qualification.
an important thing too. We talk about being able to be sure that the current mounting is sufficient. One of the things that you can do is download, like we mentioned, that pre-installation guideline that's on the website
Right.
for your new product, and print it out, hand it to them, fax it to them, refer them to it from our website, and have them look at it. Most people are going to know what their skill set is. And if they look at that and they have no idea what a vertical load and off-center moment means, that's probably not the right person to be installing that equipment.
Right.
And another resource for finding someone who may have that experience are your peers, other doctors that are in your community that
Correct.
have similarly mounted equipment. Because medical equipment is, I've discovered there typically tends to be a group of people in a community that work in that equipment. And they all typically know each other
Sure.
and can make referrals back and forth. And whether that be practice managers, to electricians, to biomed technicians, to salespeople, there's typically it's a pretty small community.
Okay, and so essentially, if you happen to be at, let's say, a convention or an exhibition, you run into some fellow surgeon or fellow veterinarian, and you find out that they already have the same lights that you have purchased, and they speak very favorably of the person who did the installation, you can get a referral
Sure.
simply via word of mouth
Right.
if they're in your same geographical area, and then use that as an installer.
Well, and of course, you can also contact us through our website because
Right.
we have the contact information. We do have some service and installation dealers, service and parts dealers, we refer to them. We don't have a thorough blanketing, but if you are not coming up with anything right away, you can contact us, and we can look through our list of dealers
Right.
and see if we happen to have somebody in your area that might be able to take care of that for you.
Sure. That's definitely also a good resource, is just to go through us. Of course, first and foremost, we'll recommend that you go through some of the steps that we mentioned.
Oh, sure.
But if you find yourself at a loss, by all means, go to our website, go to the contact form, and we will certainly see if we do have someone there locally. So, looking at just simply replacing lights, no construction, nothing like that, what type of budget are we looking at for that expense?
Again, assuming that the ceiling mount is sufficient, or whatever the mounting is, and it's unbolt and replace, again, I would say probably in the $125 to $500 range, depending on how much work needs to be done. And again, like I mentioned, on the either the minor procedure or minor surgery procedure lights like the MI 1000, the MI 500,
Right.
the Centurion on that line, I would say that probably to remove and replace a single light's probably about an hour. Two lights would be probably, like a dual unit would be about an hour and a half.
Okay. And obviously one other factor would be, let's say that this was an operating room or part of an OBGYN unit or what have you, where they have 30-year-old lights that maybe were not as structurally challenging at the time that the hospital was constructed. Now they're bringing in, let's say, our System 2 series, which is a totally different animal. Then there you might be crossing over into the realm where just an electrician might not do it. You also might have to bring in a contractor and a structural engineer.
Well, that can depend. Some of those old lights were huge and
Right.
really heavy.
Right.
I've heard some people say that it looks like a Volkswagen hanging on their ceiling.
Right,
so.
right, right.
So in those cases, again, get somebody who's qualified, who can look at that structure and say, yes, that will support the system too, or
Right.
not. And depending on what the light is that you're taking out.
So that's essentially something you have to be prepared for, is what you might think is just simply an upgrade can turn into a sort of a de facto remodel, to where there's some structural adjustments that may be required depending on what it is that you're upgrading to, that may come into play. But in general, if it's just replacing lights with the majority of the situations that we're familiar with, electrician should do the trick. Or someone who's a qualified installer,
Yeah.
like we talked about.
Well, and that's the thing is though the System 2 does require a robust mounting, it is actually still one of the lighter products on the market. I should say lightweight in its product range.
Right.
For its features and benefits and output and et cetera, and its size. It's one of the lighter units. So if you have a commensurate unit that's 20, 30 years old, there's a good chance that the structure you have now is sufficient. So they shouldn't be scared away by that.
Okay, great. Well, based on those examples, pretty much we have spelled out the general series of steps that anyone can follow in terms of finding an installer, and also briefly outlining the process in play with regard to the installation itself. So now it's just a matter of finding the right individual or individuals, utilizing their services, and making the installation happen. That's all the time that we have for this edition, and I would like to thank Keith Black for joining us. Remember that we always value your direct feedback, so be sure to connect with us via our Facebook and Twitter pages, or go to our website at www.metalloom.com to submit your questions and comments. The recording that you just listened to is the sole and exclusive property of Medical Illumination International, original broadcast date January 12, 2012. Any reproduction or distribution of this recording without the express consent of Medical Illumination International is prohibited. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for future editions of the podcast, and soon you will be able to listen to previous editions from our archives. Thanks once again for listening, and we hope that you will join us next time for the MI Podcast.